To me, they're nothing less than traitorous prostitutes. They're selling their country and their people and our ideals and our history, our culture and our constitution. They're selling that down the drain for what? For a wage? In order to pay their bills, their television license, to get a car or go on holiday once a year or whatever the excuse.
Our next speaker has stood in elections in the North West and has been a councillor for the nationalist movement. He has been on many demonstrations and expressed his freedom of speech. He is the leader of the British Voice political party. Please welcome Mike Whitby.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers. Well, what a reception. Thanks very much. And thanks for inviting us to speak on behalf of the British Voice. So, thanks very much to Bodicea. A few things. We can't go on too long because there's loads of people who want to speak, of course. So I'll fly through this as fast as I can. But there's a few things I need to go through. And when I'm finished, I also want to show you some publications that we've got, which are hopefully going to be very helpful for what you're doing. Excuse me. Just before I get going, just to relate back to what James was saying before about negative people, and we come across them all the time. You know, they say, "Is it worth it?" You know, the doom merchants. The world is, the end of the world has come. Well, all you have to think about is the last time we were given the opportunity to state how we feel about things was the Brexit vote. It's the first time in 50 years we've had any kind of a vote on immigration. And just under 17.5 million people voted to agree with us. I mean, that's what we've got to hang our hats on, because those people are not allowed to say that they don't want immigration. They've never wanted it, and no government has ever had a mandate for it. We've never given it. Not one of us in this room, and 17.5 million people at the very, very least out there don't want it either. But the despots ruling us have said, you're going to have it whether you like it or not. So, you know, this meeting today is all about, moving forward, the way ahead. So I'm going to be touching on ways in which we can improve it, and people are already doing these things. These are not sort of concepts that may or may not work. They do work. So we can step outside of the governance of those people. There's nothing in law that says we have to be governed by them. Unless they want to admit that they're a tyranny, which is the reality. If they actually come out and admit that, then we've got a different set of facts to deal with. And all of their buddies in the United Nations and everywhere else will say, oh my God, you've just admitted that you're tyrants. So they're not going to do that. So what we did is we will make sure, as we always have done, that everything we do is lawful and constitutional. Now, if you want to describe us, you could describe us as nationalists, or, you know, as other people have said, racial white people. You could also say that we are loyal, patriotic constitutionalists. Because lots of people, and you read it in the newspapers day after day, Britain hasn't got a constitution. And, you haven't got a written constitution, we have got a constitution. We've got the oldest constitution in the world. America took their constitution from ours. Magna Carta is older than anybody else's. The only difficulty, and if you take that Magna Carta, the word Carta, it means charter. If you Google charter, another meaning for that is constitution. So we've got the oldest constitution in the world. And that has been bolstered by the Bill of Rights, 1688 and 9, Declaration and Bill of Rights. So we have got a constitution. The powers that be don't want to accept it, because if they do accept it, then there's all sorts of other things that come out of the wash, so to speak. They accept that, they've got to accept that we are not obliged to pay taxes. Under our law, our constitutional law, they have to have our permission, our consent to impose taxes on us. And any legislation, in fact. Because legislation is not law. The only law is common law. Legislation is government rules and regulations. And when they come out with rules and regulations that confound or contradict or contravene our common law and our constitution, then that legislation is bad legislation and it's null and void. And we can declare that. And we've got copies of statements here that you can use to show how that can be defeated. Excuse me. Because, like I said before, when we put them on the spot, not just verbally, but in writing, and we send them notices. Notices are far more important than letters, incidentally. We send them a notice to say, this is what you are doing. You send that notice to, the police, the chief of police in the area, the local council, if it's to do with council tax, for argument's sake, the head of the Her Majesty's Court Service, the Minister of Justice, and a bailiff if there's one involved. And every one of them gets a copy of that. So it lets the government, the Minister of Justice know, and the guy at the bottom of the rung, the thug, who behaves like a bloody mafiosi executioner or whatever you want to term him, both of them, from top to bottom, know that you're onto them because they're acting unlawfully. Now, if anyone's ever had any problem with bailiffs or what they call what's this enforcement agents, they actually put that in writing now. I mean, an enforcer is a mafiosi thug. If you have any problem with them, 9 times out of 10, they're actually breaking the law by doing what they're doing. Now, this is not just me. There's lots and lots of constitutional experts. Not legal. Difference between lawful and legal is legal can go in the bin. That's just legislation. Lawful always trumps legal. So if you're ever having a dispute with somebody, use the word lawful. Now, they know very well that lawful is more important, but they try and turn the tables, as they do with lots of other things, as we're quite familiar with. And they said, well, yeah, that's not legal. Don't matter. If we get arrested by somebody, the answer is, I don't consent, officer. What's your name? I don't consent. Where do you live? I don't consent. Do you understand what I'm saying? The copper will say. And they have a slightly different language, like everyone in the judiciary does. They use language to try and trip us up. What he means by that, do you understand me, is, do you stand under my authority? And the answer is, I don't consent, officer. You could say no comment if you want, but I don't consent is far better. Because each and every time they arrest you, you just keep on saying that. Who are they going to charge? You might have your wallet with your ID in your pocket. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they know who you are. Doesn't matter if they came to your house and knocked on the door. If you don't identify yourself as that person they're looking for, then you don't consent. Because what they're after, in reality, they want you to admit to taking responsibility for the legal fiction. Now, that might sound complicated to some people, but what it is effectively is like a limited company. You know, I could have a limited company called Mike Whitby Limited. Now, there's actually a corporation being set up when I was born called Michael Whitby Limited. It's not actually limited, but it's what they call a legal fiction. Now, there's a massive bank account sitting there in my name, but I don't get to use it. And every one of you have got one as well. If you had a birth certificate and a national insurance number, then one of these accounts is set up in your name. Now, they use it for all sorts of things. Whether you realize it or not, you pay for your gas, your electric, and other utilities. You get a counterfoil at the bottom. We're all familiar with that, aren't we? What does the counterfoil look like? Is there something else that it resembles? A check. It's identical to a cheque because it is a cheque. So you send your cheque back to them and they want you to fill in the details. Put the amounts down in the corner here as to how much you've paid and whether it was in cash, notes or a cheque. And we diligently fill it in. We put our details and all the rest of it, our date of birth, and then we write cheque. So they get that and they say, all right, put that in the in tray for the cheques. Oh, and look at that. He doesn't claim accepted for value. So we'll have that as well. So they get paid twice. Now this is, you can just search accepted for value on the internet. They've got evidence, they've got proof of people sitting in offices forging people's signatures. And the reality is when it goes to the Gyro Centre in Bootle, which all of them do incidentally, it doesn't matter, it just gets scanned through the machine. It doesn't matter whether it's got a signature on it or not these days. Same as a cheque going through the bank. You can put Mickey Mouse on your cheque and it'll still go through because they don't look. A machine looks at it. So these are things that we need to make people aware of. I'm also going to be talking about the TV licence. You know, £147 a year, so to some people that's not a lot of money. And some people foolishly say, oh, well, it's worth it because we don't get adverts. Of course you get adverts. You get flaming BBC adverts, which is 10 times worse, and you get all of the nonsense. You get all the nonsense of race mixing and, you know, miscegenation, and the presenters. You know, if those foreigners represent 15% of the population of this country, why has every bloody news programme got one of them on it? That's not representation of the people. You know, we should hardly see them. You know, and then it comes into the education curriculum where now GCSEs or GCEs, whichever one you're taking, there's a question in there about negroids in I'll call them negroids because we're Caucasoid. They're negroid and there's mongoloid. So they say, when the Romans left Britain, this is in the GCSE, you might want to check it. When the Romans left Britain, they left a legion of Africans on Hadrian's Wall. About 100 of them, 90 to 100. And those people started a colony of Africans. Imagine how long they would have lasted with the Scots coming from the north and the English coming from the south. You know, if they were ever here in the first place. But all of these, like they've just come out with another program called The Romans, and half the characters are black, which would never have happened. They started in the 17th century when Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne. Some rich people started bringing in little black kids as their skivvies. But it was, you know, it was the hidden hand at work all those years ago to start introducing these people into our country, and she put a stop to it right away. She called them blackamoors and said, we're not having them. Let's send them out. And she told somebody to send them out. 3 years later, she found that they still hadn't all gone. So she told that person to get it done. Otherwise, arrest the people who've brought them here. And that happened. Can you imagine what the place would be like now if she hadn't have done that? This country would have been black 100 years ago. So, you know, she was a tough queen in many respects. But as far as the people were concerned, they called her Good Queen Bess. And she did a good job for the people. I think around that time, and for hundreds of years, there was all sorts of religious problems between Catholics and Protestants, you know, and you'd have one of them killing Catholics and the other one killing Protestants horrifically, and all claiming to be Christians. I mean, that is just ridiculous. And it's obviously got Christianity a bad name. And the powers that be, I'll keep on calling them the hidden hand if you don't mind, because the reason for that is several of our colleagues have been arrested and been incarcerated in prisons for simply telling the truth. Okay, in one or two cases they might have embellished it slightly, but one particular chap, he was only in his early 20s, did his talk, and I was actually in the court when this was being played, And there was nothing wrong. They didn't find anything wrong with his talk. It was the conversation he had afterwards with the audience in a question and answering session. Because somebody in the audience didn't have the depth of knowledge that this 22-year-old had on the subject. Because this is a very bright lad, and he's read every book going on this subject, and he knows it inside out. Now, if people don't want to, because anyone who gets up to speak, all they are the messengers. We might put our slant or interpretation on things, but we're just carrying a message. And we're hopefully prompting people to find out for themselves. It's like when we go knocking on people's doors to campaign, canvass for election or whatever, or in the street, to when we engage with them, we always say, don't take my word for it. The only way you'll believe it is if you find out for yourself. You won't believe it. You know, you believe from the propagandists who keep telling you all this nonsense, and your head's spinning with all, and you look over your shoulder before you say, I don't want them foreigners in my country. Why? We've got freedom of speech in our constitution. Why should we ever have to worry about things like that? It's outrageous. So if people are doing that, they have to check themselves and stop it and make sure that they encourage their friends to speak out loud. I want Brexit. I'm not going to wait another 5 years or however many years for Brexit, because we want it. We voted for it. And in 1972, when Heath decided to take us in, we were in the next bloody day. We had to get used to it. Prices virtually doubled on lots of things because people didn't understand, you know, the terminology and the pricing, all the rest of it. And people made hay when they went into that. And old age pensioners suffered very, very badly, as I recall, because everyone was ripping them off. And it hasn't really changed, but back then they had a finite amount of money and it had to last a week, and they'd buy exactly the same things every week. And suddenly they could only buy half the things they were buying before because they were being ripped off by people using EU prices. Anyway, just a bit of an exercise for a minute, if I may, and more so for people who might be watching this on the internet at some stage, because every one of you in this room knows what I'm talking about. But let me just go through it anyway. Imagine you find yourself in a place where the police behave like mafiosi thugs. They stifle free speech, threaten, intimidate whistleblowers, and they assist debt collectors to unlawfully bully, intimidate, and oppress people. Those same officers unlawfully assist illegal home evictions, and they force people out of their homes for no good reason. Where the local authority and judiciary are only interested in making money regardless of justice and fair play, and they break the law every single day with council tax. Because lots of people in this country are campaigning against council tax because it's one of those taxes we're not obliged to pay. But what do? They won't argue it in the court. If you go into the court and you discuss it in a common law manner, they have you arrested. I've been there several times, or thrown out of the court or whatever. So they're actually breaking the law. They're acting unlawfully. But we've now got a way around that, which I'll come to at the end. But I'm just tapping into people's imagination for the time being. This is not really happening, you understand. But where politicians and government, regardless of the party, all work for the bankers, they ignore any level of democracy and regularly commit acts of treason. Where all of the newspapers and radio stations are owned and controlled by a handful of men, all of foreign extraction and all anti-British. Where the BBC and all other TV broadcasters promote race mixing, spread evil propagandist lies, where the religion of that country is denigrated on a regular basis and no one is allowed to complain about it, but evil ideologies run riot within the same theatre. Where the establishment outlets, including the BBC, promote and praise people of different race and raise them above the indigenous population. Where child molestation runs rampant, and more often than not, the perpetrators are foreigners or politicians. where government allows millions of immigrant invaders to come and live in our homeland and receive everything free, and if the indigenous people object, they're prosecuted for something called racism. That word, incidentally, I'm sure you all know, is a Bolshevik construct by Leon Trotsky. It never existed before 1929-30, and it was invented to denigrate his opposition, to silence the opposition. Because if you say anything about the controllers, then you're a bad person, you're a racist. Pardon me. Where the government allows millions of immigrant invaders to get everything free, and they're allowed to roam free and behave however they want, to steal, bully, rape, murder the indigenous people with apparent impunity. We've actually witnessed this, lots of us. They can do anything they like. Incidentally, just on that point, there was a backlash in Ireland a few weeks ago. Lots of Africans were walking across zebra crossings and standing in the middle to stop the cars going by. And they'd lay on the bonnets and get friends to take pictures of them, or they'd take selfies. And the good people of Dublin were just sort of being patient, and I know what I would have done. Just keep on driving, they'll move out of the way. So this went on for a better part of a week. And a week later, there was a backlash from the local Hells Angels, people who paid them a visit. So, you know, good for them. So where people of another evil ideology, the hidden hand, control all government and establishment branches and entertainments, where damned lies have become part of the national education curriculum, and history is rewritten in favour of a people that never existed, where corrupt government pretends to get loans from bankers at huge interest rates, which causes the people to pay huge sums of taxes, instead of simply issuing interest-free state money, which doesn't have to be repaid. Where the country's head of state, the monarch, commits arguably acts of treason. I believe they are. The law says it's treason to do what she's done, but she's evidently held prisoner in her own country. Now, we can make excuses for it, depending on which, whether you regard yourself as a monarchist or not. The fact is, she speaks for us. Whether we like her particular family, I personally prefer the idea of a monarchy that represents the people, rather than a republic. But it's for everyone to choose, what way they want to do things. But our constitution says we live in a constitutional monarchy. Now, the traitors are trying to claim that we don't, but we do. That's what our constitution says. But, her cousins in Russia were all murdered by a section of an evil ideology. So maybe she's a bit concerned, and she's surrounded by them. So she can't actually do anything on our behalf. And interestingly, this is what the police say. Now, they'll arrest anyone who says anything out of line. But when it comes to doing something for the people of this country, they say, we can't actually get involved unless somebody makes a complaint. Theoretically, that's true. But that never bothers them when they want to arrest us for something. They just make it up. But that's the way the Constitution works. We're all allowed freedom of speech, and nobody is prosecuted unless somebody says, I didn't like that. That was out of line. And then the police arguably are supposed to step in. The Queen is not allowed to speak up for us unless she knows exactly what we want. How do we know? Coming back to James's point earlier about people saying, well, that person's no good, that person's no good. We don't know. We don't know for a fact whether she supports us or she supports them. It did come out, incidentally, after the Brexit vote. A week or two after the vote, she came out and said, I supported Brexit. And I said, well, good for you, missus. You could argue that she should have said it much earlier, but the fact is, at that point, she knew what the people wanted. and she came out and demonstrated that she was with the people. Now, if a lot more of us say to the Queen, come on, Queen Elizabeth, you can call her Her Majesty if you want to, I prefer Queen Elizabeth myself, do your job. Do your job, support our people, protect our people and our country and our land, and stop all these foreigners coming into our country. That is your job, please do it. So anyway, back to this. And were anyone stating the truth about places called Auschwitz and Dachau are prosecuted for some non-crime which contravenes the law of this land, contravenes the law of free speech, where school children and TV viewers are propagandized every day with lies and double talk about things that never happened, where there is never any mention of real atrocities where many millions of innocents have been slaughtered, where innocent people are brutalized, called terrorists, and thrown in prison for simply speaking the truth, where the people are so brainwashed, the British people are so brainwashed, that was for the sake of the camera, that they believe all of the lies that they're fed. And anyone upsetting their daydream must be bad people. So you're all bad people, you realise that, don't you? I could go on, but, need I say any more? However, the shock is that it's not imagination, it's all true. Now, we all know it's true. Hopefully the people watching this video will know it's true. Or they'll start to question it and do their own research. And you'll find that every word of it is true because we behave within the law. We don't tell lies. There's no need to tell lies. The truth is out there if you want to go looking for it. So that's 21st century Britain. So it used to be a good country. Nowadays, it's a scruffy, immigrant-laden hellhole, unfortunately. But we're going to sort it out. So I'm just going to show you a few things now for the sake of addressing this next point. Let me be very clear about this. Third world immigrant invaders who are swarming into our homeland are not welcome. Not welcome at all. Not just by us, by all the people out there. Nobody wants them. But the powers that be are imposing them on us. And they'll never be welcome. I'm just going to show you some things in here. I'm not going to take a lot of time over it. I'm simply going to show you a bunch of leaflets. There's a few bankers' leaflets at the back. Every one of these are the Navy, the Army, the IPCC. Can you see? That's the Police Complaints Commission. Now, these are not just leaflets I've gone and found. These are the official leaflets for all of these organisations. That's the Job Centre and another one.
Black faces.
Job Centre. The Ombudsman. The Post Office. Post Office again. 3 different leaflets. Oh, look at that. The Post Office again. Miscegenation. There's a black woman and a white man lying sunbathing on the beach. I've never seen a black person sunbathing. I don't see the point of it. But, I mean, it seems a contradiction in terms, really, doesn't it? And then we've got a Welsh thing there, and these people are all supposed to be Welsh, and most of them either Negroid or Mongoloid. And there's another one. Oh, they're Welsh as well. Not. This one's the CAB. We've got Indian people on it. Oh, this is Age UK. How many of your grandmothers look like that? I don't think so. Oh, this is Castles in Wales. 2 little kids on the front, mixed race kids. Because that's what they're like in Wales, isn't it, Sandra? Is it heck? Eon Electric. Oh, there you go. Santander. Oh, Santander again. The NatWest Bank. The SCS, that's the people that oversee the bankers to make sure that, Financial Services Control Authority. Nationwide Bank. NatWest again. Barclays. That's about it.
And in all the adverts.
And all the adverts on the television and the news presenters. We will not be tricked into a war with the immigrant invaders. Now, I say that because some organisations appear to be trying to get us to do that. I won't mention any names, but there are several organisations that claim to be nationalist organisations, but they're clearly not. There's only one, maybe two items on the agenda. The one item is normally anti-Islam. Well, let's face it, anyone with half a brain has got to be anti-Islam anyway to start with, because they're not suited here. But I personally prefer to say that it's not Islam, and none of them are welcome here, and let me get that clear, but I prefer to call them Quranists. Because just like, not all Jews are bad, not all Muslims are bad. I don't want any of them here, frankly, but that's my opinion. But the ones who follow the Quran and they take heed from that, they're definitely not welcome. And the people who follow another book called the Talmud, which is every bit as bad as the Quran, I call them Talmudists, arguably a lot worse. I call them Talmudists, but it doesn't mean it's all of the people from that particular race.
Actually, the Talmud's worse.
Yeah, well, if I may, this is all being recorded, so I don't want to dwell too much on particular points because I might be prosecuted for it. So I'm being very careful of what I'm saying here. The point of it is, those people...
Denigrates Christ, you see.
I know, and I could talk for 2 hours on that subject alone, believe me. And anyone can find these books to find it. There's a simple little book called The Talmud Unmasked, written by a priest about 30 or 40 years ago. Just read that, and you will be shocked. It's far worse than the Quran. And that is bloody evil in my view. So the point of this is, certain Zionist organisations want us to go to war. It's clear to me anyway. They want us to go to war with the Muslims so that we all kill each other off. And who's left holding the riches? Standing in the aisles while we're all fighting each other, other people, should we say. So, yeah, that's most of them have got that one agenda. Now, anyone who claims to be a nationalist, we've got all sorts of things that we're not happy with. Obviously, immigration is right at the top of the tree because that creates so many other problems of people not having enough houses, with all the friction between the different races, things we never had prior to 1948. We never had any of it. I was born in 52, and I never saw a black person until I was about 18 or 20. That's in Liverpool. And even in what we now know as Toxteth. I went to Toxteth when I was 16, and there's lots of terraced houses with trees on either side. Very nice little properties. 2 or 3 years later, virtually every one of those houses was owned by foreigners. Africans, Asians, mostly Africans. Just in those few short years. And all of the original indigenous people had moved out. White flight. So, coming back to it, throughout this struggle, as I mentioned before, we've always used peaceful means and will continue to do so. And we'll continue to use our constitutional law to prove beyond all doubt that we're the ones telling the truth. It's become a crime to tell the truth. If it's become a crime to tell the truth, in reality, then those in government are clearly despotic tyrants. So if we want to continue doing our efforts and they want to keep on doing what they're doing, then they're proving that they're tyrants. They can't claim to this. They can't claim to run a democracy when they don't allow people to speak their mind or represent the views of the indigenous people. The only views they want to see expressed are those of the foreigners that we don't want to hear in the first place. So, but for those people, to me, they're nothing less than traitorous prostitutes. They're selling their country and their people and our ideals and our history, our culture and our constitution. They're selling that down the drain for what? for a wage in order to pay their bills, their television license, to get a car or go on holiday once a year or whatever the excuse. Well, I'll lose my job if I say anything. Well, so what? Lots of us have lost our bloody job. Say it anyway. And the more of us that say it, the more safe people are going to be. Because the scales tend to tip when they go beyond a certain level. At the moment, our scales are down here up there, because not that many people are saying what they feel. But the more people who start saying, yeah, I agree, the scale comes down and the one with the foreigners on goes up. And at that point, the businesses, the establishment and everyone else, oh yeah, I'm with them as well. They don't want anyone to think that they're with the ones who are losing. But until we express what we really feel, they can do whatever they like. So we need to get people educated in terms of how we're going to do it. As I mentioned before, let it be known that we are loyal, patriotic constitutionalists. If anyone doesn't know about the Constitution, we're giving them leaflets to show where to look to find out more about it. And to be armed, to keep a leaflet with them and be armed with it. Say, excuse me, officer, do you know under XYZ law, you require my consent for taxation and for me to follow your legislation? And the cop are usually, I don't know what you're talking about, mate. Oh, you haven't got my consent. They know that bit. They pretend they don't know it, but they do. They know it. So we've also got documents here that we can use to reinforce that. So we'll continue to stand up for our people and our country for as long as it takes. Just to illustrate the point, in 58 BC, Marcus Tullius Cicero wrote the following article called The Traitor. He said, "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and he carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. For the traitor appears not a traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their face and their arguments. He appeals to the baseness that lies deep within the hearts of men. He rots the soul of a nation. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is less to fear." That was Marcus Tullius Cicero. It's absolutely spot on with what the establishment are doing in our country. They've got us so tightly by forgive the expression, the short and curlies, that people are terrified to move in case they walk away without them. So before I finish, let me just show you some papers. In terms of anyone who is sick to the back teeth of paying a TV license, there's 2 letters here that can lawfully get you out of paying it. And it's £147 a year. So imagine if you did that for 8 years, it's about 1,100 odd quid. That's when I stopped paying it. This next one, anyone got a mortgage? There's 10 questions on there that you need to ask your mortgage company, because 99% of mortgages are corrupt and unlawful because they don't actually lend you any money in the first place. But that is a massive subject, and I haven't got the time to explain it. But the questions on here do. There's another one I mentioned before about how we get redress when we're being unlawfully challenged. This is a notice. You see it in very small print at the top. Notice, they take a lot more notice of a notice, excuse the pun, than they do to a letter. Your letter's filed in the bin, but a notice, especially when it's got the chief executive officer of the offending company and their complaints department, the offending chief constable of your area, the Minister of Justice, and on the other side we've got one to the head of HM Courts. So these are very powerful letters, they actually work. Another one, Britain's constitutional monarchy. If anyone wants to sort of reinforce what I've been talking about, they can read that one. And this one is an initiative has been pushed for a few years now. It's Magna Carta. There's some people calling themselves a variety of organisations, such as we are, because this initiative hasn't come from one organisation. It was originally put together by the British Constitution Group, but several others, including the Dragons and ourselves, lots of people, nationalists, are pushing it. And it's an oath, because if you know anything about, pardon me, Magna Carta, particularly Article 61, Article 61 says that, and I can't remember it verbatim, but effectively it says that if the king, or queen in this case, does anything to offend the people, or any of her servants, that goes right down to the police and the establishment, a whole lot of them, then you can come to me and basically arrest me as the king or the queen. But in order to do so, please choose 25 barons to lead your organisation. Then those, if you're going to arrest us, send 4 of those barons to come along to us, and we won't resist. This is all part of Article 61 Magna Carta. Your rights, your constitution. And then, so this is an oath to say, I agree with that action. You know, it should be presented to the Queen. So there's copies of all of these over there. Now, I'll just take 30 seconds to show. There's a collection of papers here for the British Voice. They're not all over there because we didn't have enough time to produce them all. But one of them is the Magical Isles, which are these wonderful isles. And people for centuries have called these Magical Isles, for millennia in fact. And they don't understand why we're Magical Isles, but they are. There's some indication in there. There's another one about protecting the indigenous people. And there's some information inside about how we can go about that. There's another one. I alluded to something earlier where 100 years ago, there was a massive persecution and destruction of Caucasoid people in Europe. It wasn't carried out by the indigenous people. It was immigrants going into that country. And within a few short years, they'd murdered 30 million of them. And most of the churches were burned to the ground. The priests, the nuns were mostly murdered, hanged, crucified, or raped. Obviously, there weren't Christians that were doing this. And I said on my last talk in this particular forum that there was another particular ideology whose temples were never touched. But it wasn't Islam. And just on that point, before I move on, some of us know that Spain was subjugated by Islam for approximately 300 years. Yeah, we all know that. Did you also know who the administrators were at the time? Don't shout it out, because it's being recorded. Research it. Just like they're the administrators in this country now. They were the administrators in Spain during that period. This one is our Constitution. Picture of King John and Magna Carta and what have you on the front page. This is and all of the facts that I've been talking about. And that's it. So we've got about 7. I think there's about 4 or 5 of them over there. So however many we've got there, you're very welcome to take them. And keep in touch. And for those people watching on the internet, get involved. Don't just join. I mean, join us by all means if you want, or join Steve's organisation, the British Movement, or the National Front. Don't join the BNP. I don't want to go into negatives, but it's not a good idea. Let's just say that. That's speaking from someone who was a BNP officer. But there's lots of genuine nationalist organisations, so get involved. But don't just say when you're watching, I'm going to get involved with them. Because you know what? The one definition of commitment, the word commitment, is doing the thing you said you would do long after the mood that you said it in has left you. So anyone saying they're going to do something, if we're going to make it happen, we've got to get off our backsides and do it.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, folks. All the best.